They're going to restrict pay for only 1 year and only for certain banks. Your thoughts?
You know, the good news is it fulfills your public, the public outrage, your lust for blood.
It's a good headline. It's a good headline.
The problem is you talk about the rules changing. The rules just changed again. The goalpost just moved, and it creates a two-layered system that's even worse than it was before, because you have the companies that are in trouble, the ones that we're shareholders of, by the way, as taxpayers, that are in trouble.
Yes.
Now they're going to have curbs on their pay, and yet Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, and every other firm that got government money
still is getting it.
Still is getting it, but has paid back some of it. Now they can pay whatever they want. They're not going to go pluck and there's only the top 25 people. So they're going to go take the best 25 people from the companies that we own.
Let's pretend I work at Citigroup and I'm really talented.
You're really talented.
Yeah, I'm Mr. Man.
Right?
Yeah.
You're really talented. Goldman Sachs is going to call you up and say, hey, why don't you come over here, and we're still allowed to pay you whatever we want.
Isn't Goldman Sachs also still allowed to use FDIC-insured assets?
They are.
And speculate with them?
So
can they also go to the...
We have not changed the incentive system at all, and what we really need is regulatory reform across the board, and what you need is, to me, the big thing is capital requirements, because you need what that means is, the banks need to have a certain amount of money in the bank.
Why?
On a relative basis.
That's crazy. They need to have money in the bank?
On a relative basis to how much money they're lending at any given point. Okay?
Give me an example. So I'm a bank.
So you're a bank.
Yeah.
We would like you to keep a couple dollars in the bank for every dollar you're going to lend out.
So what's reasonable?
And by the way, that's because we don't want the system at risk. And the problem the first time was there was no cushion. We had no money in the bank the first time.
The banks were lending money they didn't have.
That they didn't have. Okay. So the problem...
Hang on. Why were they doing that?
Because they were making enormous, or thought they were making enormous money at the time. They really weren't, but they were able,
the more loans they made, the more money they made.
Exactly. So what we need is to raise the requirement so that all the profits that you keep hearing the banks making profits,
Goldman had a record,
and they're giving it to their employees, right? Yes. All these bonuses you're talking about that ever seem crazy.
It's beautiful.
You need to take that money and say, you know what, the requirement is higher now. So they would be taking all that money, putting it into the bank, making their bank safer, therefore making the system safer. Instead, we haven't had any true regulatory nothing, and we're still in the same boat we were before. Now, I want to say one caveat to all of this, which is there is an argument against raising these limits in this environment.
The capital
requirement limit, which is that
they don't have the money.
A, they don't have the money, but B, the higher capital requirement, the less lending, at least in the short term, you're going to have. So to the extent you're talking about individuals who think they need money, there is an argument to be made that if you raise it today in this environment, in this economy, that maybe you don't want to. Now, I'm not saying that's right.
I understand, but
for long term, that's what needs to happen.
There's two ways to make money as a bank, basically, right? One, I can collect deposits, and I can make out, assess loan risk, I can make home loans, et cetera, right? Mm-hmm. That's sort of your local custodian at my bank where I grew up in Saranac Lake.
That's not how they were making money at the time.
Right. Okay. And the other way is I can take other people's money.
Shareholder money.
OPM.
Yes.
Okay? And I can take that OPM and I can start putting huge bets on.
Right.
But my concern is that this time with too big to fail, the OPM, the other people's money, is the future wealth of our generation, of our nation, being used as a gambling chip ordained by the government.
Right. And that is the great worry. But, you've spent a lot of time on this broadcast because I watch it talking about the bailout.
Yep.
And this book really is about the bailout. It's the human, you talk about a system and institutions that are too big to fail. This is really a human drama about people who are too big to fail, or who think that they're too big to fail.
And that's what struck me.
And that's really the issue.
What was when you look at Henry Paulson, the man, ran Goldman Sachs, becomes a Treasury Secretary, clearly very intelligent person.
Right.
All these manners are brilliant in their own way. Their ability to navigate in the world of numbers is supreme.
Right.
But are they doing it at the expense of capitalism?
Well, so the big shocker for me was we woke up in September and thought the world was on fire, and it was like a surprise. And the saddest part in terms of the reporting was when you get inside the room and you peel it back, you realize that they saw the train coming down the tracks way before.
Who are they?
They, the government. And frankly, some of the
Treasury Department?
The Treasury Department.
The bank CEOs?
The bank CEOs. I mean, I will tell you, there's a scene in the book, April 15th, Neil Kashkari.
What year?
2008.
Last year,
2008. Neil Kashkari, you've heard that name.
I know him.
You know him. He's a fellow who worked at Treasury.
He used to also work at Goldman Sachs.
And Goldman Sachs, yes, sir. Wrote a plan that actually is the TARP plan. When you go back and look at TARP,
Yeah.
He wrote an 11-page paper that is TARP in April. So they saw this.
They knew this was coming.
And everybody is, you know, as you read the book, you'll see everyone's squirming to get out of the way of the train, right? They see it coming down the track, and yet they still couldn't. And so there's part of me that says, I give them credit for seeing it.
Well, didn't they build it, though? My point is, is it the reason?